This is From Both Sides, a spontaneous, free-flowing conversation featuring a dynamic team of women, providing insights into both political and civic events affecting the lives of women throughout Pennsylvania. And now, here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to the premiere edition of From Both Sides. I'm Michelle Saletto, your host, and I hope you'll join us as we introduce you to topics of interest to women and families in Pennsylvania, largely from a female perspective. We hope to foster women's involvement in leadership roles in politics and civic pursuits, and have some fun along the way, from both sides, with Republican and Democratic perspectives. And speaking of fun, I'd like to introduce my co-host, the Republican, Donna Reinecker. Donna?
Thank you, Michelle. This is very interesting because usually you introduce me as your token Republican friend. But this is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. We're hoping to demystify politics to a great deal. There's so many things that are going on now, and I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to use some of our experience and pay it forward and let other women know what's going on so we can get more and more women involved with politics. And speaking of politics, we are delighted to have as our first guest Dana Brown. She is here as the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Center for Women in Politics at Chatham University in Pittsburgh. Welcome.
Well, thank you, and congratulations on the new show.
Thank you,
It's
Dana.
exciting.
Thank you. We're thinking for our first show, we really need an idea of where women are in politics. What is the status of women in politics? So please tell us a little bit about your center and some of the work that you do.
Absolutely. So the Pennsylvania Center for Women in Politics at Chatham University is a nonpartisan center. So maybe I should sit somewhere between you two. So we do, see everything from both sides, so to speak.
Great.
We are, like I said, nonpartisan center at a university, which means, we're trying to educate and empower women throughout their entire lifetime in terms of politics and public policy. So obviously we have a lot of student programs on campus in order to educate and empower them, and a lot of voter registration opportunities. We have Washington, D.C. seminars that we send them to. We have a wonderful new leadership program, which is a 6-day residential boot camp for young people.
That sounds wonderful.
And then obviously for community members, we offer campaign training, which is bipartisan in nature. But what I want to point out is that we haven't been around for too long. We were established in 2001 with a wonderful endowment from the Hillman Foundation, which is a great foundation in Pittsburgh, and people know it all over the state. And it was primarily a Republican woman, Elsie Hillman, who, she was the first woman chair of the Allegheny County Republican Party, and had a really difficult time getting party support, even from other women, the way she tells it. And so this has really stayed with her throughout her entire lifetime. And so, at Chatham, we're focused on women's education. We primarily were a women's college. Next year we'll be going co-ed for the first time.
Awesome.
But so we're there to educate and empower women, and it really came from a place of experience, from Mrs. Hillman's experience, and the foundation wanting to do something about that and try to get more women involved in Pennsylvania politics.
Well, Dana, to that end, why don't you talk a little bit about the percentages of women we have in elected office in Pennsylvania, because I think we all know that we don't fare very well nationally, especially for the size of our state.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. As I always point out, we have great women leaders in all of our communities. We all know them, right? I mean, they're at the food bank, they're at our churches, running PTA. We have great women leaders. On the other hand, we don't see too many of them running for public office. So when you take a look at the state legislature, we've kind of plateaued the last couple of cycles. We're at about 18% female, or as I like to say, 82% male. So we tend to be overrepresented in terms of the male viewpoint in Harrisburg. So that's remained stable. I mean, just in the last election, really we gained one in the state Senate, which was great, but then we lost one in the state House, which was not so great. So that's how, not so well we're doing there on the state legislative side. Obviously statewide, we've never had a female governor, never had a female United States senator. And as of today, we no longer are sending any woman to Congress
Yes.
at all. And we are the most populous state now that is not sending any woman to Congress. So right after us is Georgia.
Wow. Well, I will mention that I'm very happy to say that our first woman that was elected to the Supreme Court was Sandra Schultz Newman, who was a fabulous jurist. She was really a wonderful jurist. So we've had one woman in the Supreme Court. Do we have any? I guess we have a couple now.
Right,
Yes.
actually, Justice Deborah Todd is a
one.
Chatham alum and is presently serving, yes.
That's right.
And Kate Ford Elliott. Yes, and of course we have Kathleen Kane, who was the first Democrat elected as Attorney General, first woman elected as Attorney General.
That's right.
So, what is it, do you think, about Pennsylvania? What's in the water that is making it either hard for women or doesn't motivate women, or why don't women run?
Well, so there's a few issues. Let's tackle one about why there are so few women, let's say, in the state legislature. So just drawing on political science literature, we know that incumbency matters. And so we don't have term limits in this state. We know that redistricting and gerrymandering is quite strong in this state as well. And so, women see that there are challenges out there to running. I mean, no matter you're a man or a woman as a newcomer, with the incumbency advantage of being as strong as it is in Pennsylvania, it's really difficult to win. So you have to wait for those open seat opportunities, most likely. And as part of that, it feeds into that system is our political party structure, which you two might know pretty well. But the political party structure varies in each and every one of our states. And so Pennsylvania has what we call, a strong traditional party system that has a hierarchy. Many, even county parties, have actual brick and mortar offices. They have headquarters. It's kind of professionalized, if you will. In many other states, that doesn't exist. And so, the party system is a way in which endorsements are made or not, resources are at play, fundraising, money, volunteers. So that all leads to a system where newcomers generally are not as welcome, which women, are still relatively political newcomers.
But I don't see that either party really looks for women candidates to the extent that I think they should. I don't see them going out and recruiting great women leaders and promoting women. I just don't see it.
I think the parties have done a better job recently in doing that. I think people have gotten more involved with looking for women, looking for good candidates, and luckily there have been more and more women that are good candidates. I don't think people have really been that concerned about gender to this point. I mean, we as women, I think that's one of the things that we should really be focusing on, because I think when people think of good candidates, you think of men. But until recently, women have to think of each other, and we have to think of ourselves. I think it's so rare that when we're talking about a good political candidate, we think of ourselves first.
Well, interestingly, I was with a female state representative yesterday, and I said, "Why do you think women run, and why do you think men run?" And she said, "I think women run out of passion and issues and things in the community that drive them and they feel very strong about." She said, "I think men tend to run based on ego."
And
they
there's
think they
some,
can do the job, and I'm not man bashing. Love men, love men.
There is
not man bashing, but I will say that I tend to hear men think right out of the gate, "I've never done that before, but I can do it," and I don't hear that as often from women. I don't hear it as often from women.
No, well, so there's some data to support what you're saying a bit, and the female state representative you were with. I point to a study from 2009 from the National Center for American Women in Politics at Rutgers University, and they did a comprehensive survey of all of the current state legislators nationally, and they asked them what their motivations, men and women, right, state legislators. What were your motivations for running? And they found that there was about 30%, I would say, women responded that men responded that it was always something that they had just wanted to do. When about, more than a third of the women surveyed, it was an issue. They wanted to be a change agent for their community. And so, there are many motivations why people run, but yeah, some men, it's just something that they'd always wanted to do. And, at the center, what we're trying to do is make that more of a reality for women. We want women to wake up in the morning and say, I want to run for office. I mean, what a wonderful place that would be if we had that. But then likewise for our male counterparts to be driven by an issue, by being a change agent. I think both could stand to improve a little bit on both of those measures.
I don't think we have a lot of role models that are women. I mean, I don't think that there are a lot of women that I think, geez, I want to be just like her. There have been a few, but I think more and more when young girls see their mothers or their friends or their neighbors in those positions, I think it will be very helpful.
Well, funny, when I became a school superintendent many years ago, one of my friend's husbands actually said to me, the best part of you being a superintendent, Michelle, and I said, what's that? And he said, every little girl in that school is going to see you and say, I could be a superintendent someday. And so right. I think you make a valid point about the role models. We need to see more women so that we can keep seeing more women.
Yep.
Well, there's a little tagline that we use at the center, and it's, if you can't see it, you can't be it.
Mm-hmm. It's really
so, and during our new leadership program, the 6-day residential public leadership boot camp for undergraduate students, is, we spend a lot of time trying to connect these young undergraduates with women, like yourselves, who are out there doing the work, whether it's in government as a politician or as a bureaucrat, someone who's serving publicly. That's, 6 days of networking for them and skills building. But yeah, just exactly that. We know that we need mentors to make a difference.
Well, Dana, the last election cycle, I think we had around 55 women running in Pennsylvania. On the
68.
Well, okay, I'm counting. I was counting my, I guess, Democratic side. Sorry about that.
They're the only ones that matter, of course.
But we didn't do very well. The women that we promoted with the state Democratic women did not fare well.
It was a bad year for Democrats. Right, Donna?
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a bad year for Democrats, a very good year for Republicans. And we know that that more women tend to identify with the Democratic Party, which means we have more Democratic women running as candidates, which means if it's a good year for Republicans, oftentimes that means it's not such a good year for women candidates.
Although when we come back from our break, I'd like to ask you about the perception of there being fewer Republican women involved, because I think it's pretty well even as far as the Republican women and the Democrat women that are in public office right now.
And your party has a really strong program, which we can also talk about, that has a pipeline to leadership that unfortunately right now the Democratic Party does not have. But yeah, we can definitely speak to that.
Okay, we're going to take a break right now, and we'll be back with our next segment in just a few minutes.
From Both Sides is a production of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy and is made possible by the support of the Pennsylvania Center for Women in Politics at Chatham University, a nonpartisan center devoted to fostering women's public leadership through education, empowerment, and action. The first to focus on women's political involvement in Pennsylvania, the center integrates disciplinary knowledge, civic education, and capacity building, while examining the intersection of women and public policy. From Both Sides is also supported as a public service by Saul Ewing LLP, a law firm with a 100-year tradition of serving the needs of business, government, education, healthcare, technology, and manufacturing in our region.
Welcome back to our premiere edition of From Both Sides. And joining us is our guest, Dana Brown, the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Center for Women in Politics at Chatham University in Pittsburgh. Glad to have you, Dana. And Donna, I think you were going to follow up with a question that we really ended the last segment with.
Yes, we were just about to talk about Christine Toretti and her wonderful program. And you have an association with Christine. Have you worked with Christine, I know that she has a wonderful program for Republican women, teaching them how to run and really how to prepare for all.
Right. So while we are a nonpartisan center, Christine has established, which is called the Ann Anstein series in public excellence or public service excellence. And it's a wonderful program for GOP women. It runs not just in Pennsylvania, but in Arizona as well, actually. So she's in 2 states trying to make a difference. It's a 9-month mentoring program. They take women around the state and introduce them to folks and train them as well. So within each region of Pennsylvania, when the Ann Anstein ladies come in, they're learning a skill. So they're networking and learning a skill for their own campaigns. And it's been tremendously successful. The Ann Anstein program teaches women to run campaigns from the local level on up, and a number have been successful. On the Democratic side, unfortunately, there's nothing like that in the state, but we know that there are a number of programs nationally that are there to serve Democratic women. So don't feel left out, Michelle.
Well, and I must tell you a little funny story. I almost was in the Republican leadership program. I became acquainted with an official from the Corbett administration. She and I hit it off, very friendly. I kept the relationship going for some time before I made the mistake of saying to her, "What does your party think of something?" And she said, "Michelle, my party." And I said, "Oh, I guess I'm going to have to tell you, I'm a Democrat." But one of the funny things she said to me when she first met me was, "How did we miss you in our women's leadership program?" And of course, I'm thinking, well, because I'm a Democrat, but I didn't want to tell her that. But so I've heard great things about the program.
No, and that's how women get started, though. So maybe, we should talk a bit about that. Is that women often wait to be asked to participate, to run for office, and so on. The Ann Anstein program does a really good job of asking women to participate in their program, and for the mentoring aspect of it. And I do a lot of asking too. I feel like that's most of my job is going out and reminding women that we're leaders too. Leadership looks like this, and so why don't you consider running for office and attending the bipartisan program that we run, which is the Ready to Run campaign training, and that's in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. But
that's coming up shortly, isn't it?
It is in a few weeks, right, on Saturday, January 31st in Pittsburgh.
Okay, great.
Yeah. But so we know that we have these opportunities for women. We just need to take advantage.
I do want you to know I've recommended to a young woman from Butler County who is considering a countywide run, the Ready to Run program, so I think we'll see her in Pittsburgh.
Thank you. We've had some success, actually a little bit more on the judicial side in terms of the candidates that have come from Ready to Run. So we've had a couple state representatives, but also a few judges get elected after attending our program as well.
Dana,
that's wonderful.
What are the numbers in the judicial side, since we have state appellate races coming up this year? Do you track what percentages of our women are on the bench?
We do. So if you go to the pcwp.org website, you can see a map of the state that has all of our county information, and we have a judicial tab just for that. And overall, people make the assumption that women do better in judicial races. I'm not sure where this assumption or perception comes from, but I can say that women only comprise about 24 to 25% of our court system here within the state of Pennsylvania, and that's in the aggregate. So pulling all of the courts together. So again, nowhere near parity on the judicial side, which is why we added a judicial track to our Ready to Run campaign training program in an effort to create that pipeline to the bench for women.
Well, the numbers are so poor across the board in Pennsylvania with the number of women elected officials. Really, why should we care? Why should the public care that the numbers are so low for women?
That's a really good question, because people often think I'm counting beans for the sake of counting beans here. But we know from social science research that our voices matter, that when we are at the decision-making table, new ideas are actually brought, right? Different perspectives are brought to the table. Actually, the way in which we communicate is different about those issues. So we're actually changing some of the dialogue about policy when we're there. And because of that, bipartisanship actually does increase. Government transparency increases, so some good governance types of things we see. And then ultimately, you know, our public policy outcomes should be, you know, and are generally more reflective of who we are as a democracy, right? I mean, for small d democratic values, we want to see people who look like us represent us.
Absolutely. We've talked about this often. There's a big difference in running and in governing. And even though it's very different when women run, and there are different things that motivate women to run, I think once they start governing, there's also a big difference. And I think that's something that we're looking to really improve our government, because there's so many women that have good ideas, that like the idea of bringing other people together, and that really could help a lot of the ways that we
And women can be
business.
so much more collaborative, really.
Yes.
That's why bipartisanship tends to, you know, increase. Women tend to work across the aisle a little bit better and differently than the male counterparts. So like I said, yeah, in total, I mean, just the whole policy discussion and what gets done, how it gets done. I mean, the procedure inevitably changes. So again, sort of these good governance things that we all sort of want, you know, that's an outcome of greater diversity in our governing boards. And while we want parity, I can tell you again from research that we need at least 30%. We need at least 30% women in order to, right. And so right now at our legislature, we're at about 18%. So we're not there yet for those sort of, you know, good governance outcomes that I talk about, because people will challenge me on that and say, oh, well, you have women in there now. I'm not necessarily sure if bipartisanship is increasing, et cetera, et cetera. But again, we need to reach at least that 30% threshold where we can start expecting some of these outcomes.
Well, I'm sorry. The other thing I just want to make a point of, at least in the Pennsylvania General Assembly, I don't see many people in leadership. And I think that until women are in leadership, nothing is really going to change significantly, other than a token woman here or there. There is a woman here or there. But unless women have a greater role in leadership, and I just don't see that happening.
But how do those leadership opportunities become available? Seniority. Seniority, right? I mean, that's the way our legislature works. And so, right, we need to have women running when they're younger. Women tend to wait generally until they're 50 or over. Their child rearing responsibilities have not concluded. You know, probably you're still raising kids at the, you know, when they're 35. But, you know, the point being that once the kids are out of the house, women start to think about, you know, public service. And so because, you know, they're running at 50, 55 for the first time, well, you know what, their leadership possibilities with lack of seniority in their shorter career versus a guy running at 30 years of age are just vastly different. So
what would you say to a young woman that is interested in politics, that has heard this conversation and they think, you know what, I have the capabilities to do this. I can get my friends together. We have issues. We can work. Where do you start?
So obviously, you know, women, if they're interested in getting involved at any age, are welcome to come to the Pennsylvania Center for Women in Politics at Chatham University. We do offer programs in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, so we're, you know, trying to reach out regionally. You know, we have campaign trainings for them so they can learn some of those skills. You know, rarely do people generally wake up and say, not only do I want to run, but I have all the skills already to run a campaign, right? Media, how to fundraise. These are not necessarily intuitive things, but they're skills that can be learned. And so we're here to teach you those. But then also I would encourage women to get involved in their community, right? In their own neighborhoods. You know, they can take leadership roles and start to build a name for themselves and lay that groundwork for public leadership. It's there for the taking. There's so many opportunities, particularly in local government, to get involved and, like I said, kind of start making your name.
School boards,
Volunteer activities. There are so many volunteer and kind of philanthropic opportunities where people really can network and get to know a lot of people and really make a mark in their community. And I always think that's a factor in how well you're known in your community, how well you're received in your community by the work that you do.
Right. I started with working on other people's campaigns. Find somebody that you like and somebody that you think they'll do a great job, and help them. I think that's another good way to get
absolutely
started.
Volunteer on a campaign. Learn what that's like. Learn what all the different mechanics that go into a campaign. That's hugely important and helpful, I think, when you're building a political career.
So what would you say, again, to a young woman who's thinking about this? I'm thinking about, I know a young woman I met recently who said, I think I'd like to run for public office, and she's very young, in a large city.
Well, again, I really do think the campaign trainings are helpful. If you're specifically, a Republican woman and you absolutely want to stay within the party, then I would recommend the Ann Anstein program. If you're, not so sure if you necessarily want to go that route, you can, come to the one-day campaign training, the Ready to Run training in Pittsburgh on January 31st. And that'll give you a flavor of how to develop a campaign plan, how to fundraise, how to look good on camera, which you do so well. And then, like I said, we have the judicial track. So if she's thinking about, running at all, it doesn't hurt to attend one of these things. It's low cost, low time.
And there are always things you can learn. I know that Michelle and I are planning to be there in Pittsburgh, so we're looking forward to seeing you there.
Joining you, yes. Thank you so much. So skills first for young women who are interested in running. Get those skills that you're going to need to run an effective campaign.
And so many of them are transferable, right? I mean, if you're going to fundraise for a campaign, you might be fundraising for an NGO someday or fundraising for your kid's soccer team. Who knows? I mean, these are skills that I find that are really transferable and helpful across the board.
Well, Dana, thank you so much for being here today. I think you're a wealth of information and a terrific role model for young women who are thinking about running for political office. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me as your first guest.
Okay. We look forward to seeing you at Ready to Run, too. Well, that's our show for today. We hope that as you tune into our show, you'll feel as we do, and that despite our political differences, there's much more that unites us as women in Pennsylvania than divides us. And we hope most of all that you will join us for the next show from both sides on your local cable station, on demand, or YouTube. Thank you.